This video is a part 2 of a series we started here on the channel recently, so go watch part 1 if you haven't done so already. In part 1, we ranked the top 10 bladers in each arc of Metal Fusion, while only focusing on the events of one arc at a time. For example, in the Road to Battle Bladers arc, we got introduced to Tsubasa, and he eventually had a match against Jinga. It was made very clear that Tsubasa was holding back his true power, and Jinga won. Later on, we find out that Tsubasa was in fact holding back a ton of power, but we placed him low in the rankings because we didn't know that at the time. All we knew from this arc is that Tsubasa lost to Jinga. He didn't show us any special moves or anything. So basically what we're doing is we're zooming in on one arc and ranking everyone on how strong they are in that specific arc based off of what they showed us in that specific arc. So, who are the strongest characters in every arc of Beyblade Metal Masters? Before we jump right in, shout out to New Horizons again for inspiring this series with his own, ranking the strongest characters of every arc in Naruto. So if you like Naruto, definitely go check him out. New Horizons has a bunch of great videos, but let's get started. Here's where we left off in part 1. Power levels are pretty high, but there's still some lingering questions that need to be answered in this second season, like what's going to happen to Jinga now that Pegasus is gone, and also what's going to happen to Ryuga. Well, Arc 1 answers one of those questions, so let's just get into it. This arc is going to be called the Selection Arc, and it's episodes 52 through 57. This arc shows us what life is like post-Dark Nebula and post-Battle Bladers. The popularity of Beyblade has spread all over the world, so the newly reformed WBBA has decided to hold a Beyblade World Championships. We're introduced to our very own Team Gang Gang Galaxy representing Japan. We meet some new characters, and we also get reintroduced to some old ones. So here are the top 10 strongest bladers from this arc. For a bit, Jinga may have fallen out of the rankings because he had no Beyblade, but once he gets Galaxy Pegasus, he's on a whole new level of power. It was referred to as the Legendary Bay, and its raw power far exceeded anything that we'd ever seen in Metal Fusion. And then Ryuga is going to keep his spot at number 2 because no one in this arc shows that they could have beaten Dark Ryuga like Jinga did. Kiyoya is also going to solidify his number 3 spot with a very impressive win over Tsubasa, and he was also the first one to qualify by a long shot. But now that he's left the team to challenge Jinga, he's going to have to become a whole lot stronger if he really wants to win, so we'll be on the lookout for that. Now we have our first new character of the video, and it's going to be Chiyun coming in at number 4. Now, this may seem pretty high, but in this arc alone, we didn't know how strong he really was. All we saw was him in a 2v2 against Jinga and Masamune, and he looked pretty good. Jinga and Masamune both fully admitted that they were targeting Lacerda, yet between the two of them, they couldn't knock him out. But also, while he was watching Tsubasa's match, he was kind of talking like Tsubasa wasn't really a threat, and you have to be a pretty strong blader to talk like that about Tsubasa. But speaking of Tsubasa, he's at number 5. He beat you pretty soundly, and he had a good fight with Kiyoya. I have him above Masamune because I don't think Masamune is competing with Kiyoya the way Tsubasa did. Tsubasa, though, seems to have a new sinister power that we can only assume will get worse as time goes on. We don't know what's going on yet, but we will soon. We then have Masamune at 6 and you at 7, and then our bottom 3 is made up of some old Metal Fusion characters who didn't participate in this arc, and that's Phoenix, Doji, and Reggie. I have them here because power levels have already increased so much from Metal Fusion. I mean, we have Galaxy Pegasus, it's so much stronger than Storm Pegasus, and all the new characters are kind of relative with this new Jinga. Meanwhile, the bottom 3 all lost to Storm Pegasus. So that's the Selection arc. Moving on, we have the China arc, or the Wang Huzhong arc, whatever you want to call it, but this consists of episodes 58 through 62. Here's where we meet the rest of Chiyun's squad, and we realize that there are probably hundreds of powerful bladers all over the world that we just don't know about. For example, Deshayan jumps Ryuga for the number 2 spot after going toe-to-toe with this new Jinga. He has a handful of special moves and techniques to use, making him a pretty tough opponent to face. Our next change is actually going to be Masamune jumping ahead of Tsubasa for the number 6 spot, and this is because Masamune had his little training arc after he lost to Chaoshin. The mysterious old man trained Masamune to perfect the 1-point breakthrough, which is basically pouring all of your power into one singular point, and it made him a lot stronger. I will say that his training alone wasn't enough to put him ahead of Tsubasa. The other reason I put him above Tsubasa is because of Tsubasa's strange power and the fact that it's becoming worse. Against Chiyun, he crashed out of the stadium and self-destructed. I mean, the raw power he now has is incredible, but he can't control it at all. So until he shows a little mastery over this power, he's likely going to stay here. So overall, the Wang Huzhong arc introduced us to some really strong bladers, and it's only going to increase our excitement of what the other countries have to offer. Our next arc is going to be the Russia arc, or I guess you could call it the Lavushka arc as well. It's made up of episodes 63 through 68, and as suggested by the name, our own Gang Gang Galaxy is taking on Team Lavushka Lavushka of Russia. Funny enough though, the new entries to the top 10 from this arc don't come from our time in Russia at all. There's an episode before and after the Russia matchup, which introduces us to the members of Team Excalibur, and boy are they strong. I included these episodes in the Russia arc because they just don't fit anywhere else, and the Russia matchup itself added no new characters to the top 10. The Bladers of Team Lavushka, they were just decent. They probably would have placed in Metal Fusion, but with the increased power levels of Metal Masters, none of them get into the top 10. Now, back to Excalibur, we have Julian at the 1. In this arc, everyone is completely freaked out by the fact that he uses reverse rotation, and rightfully so. The only other person who could do that was Ryuga, the guy with a quote-unquote forbidden bay, and the same guy who almost ended the world. Mix that in with the fact that he soloed an entire team. I mean, even if the team wasn't that strong, that's still very impressive, and we didn't even think that was possible. He also has a mode change and a crazy special move. Two more interesting additions are Sophie and Wales, coming in at number 5 and 6. Again, maybe this is high, but at the Festival of Warriors, these two were legit. They won in a 3v3 against Gang Gang Galaxy, and they have a joint special move that's literally a tidal wave. So overall, the Russia arc introduced us to some Avengers level threats, being Team Excalibur. We know that Japan is probably going to have to face them eventually, so we're going to begin to wonder how they can even compete. Also, Tsubasa sat out of the Russia matchup, so now we're wondering if he's going to be okay. But that's all for the Russia arc. Now we're moving on to what I think is my favorite arc of the entire Metal series. We have the Wild Fang arc. This is episodes 69 to 74, and this arc beautifully introduces Kyoya back into the story with his own team in Africa. All the build-up, all the anticipation for this matchup was just amazing. We get the Wild Fang backstory, we get Wild Fang versus Shandora, and then we of course get the absolute classic that was Wild Fang versus Japan. Overall, a 10 out of 10 arc, nothing more to say there. So here's the top 10 for this arc. I actually have Kyoya at the 2 here above Jinga, which may be a hot take. They did tie, but I think at this point, Kyoya is the stronger blader. I mean, he had a counter for literally every single one of Jinga's moves. Star Booster attack, his new tornado countered. Jinga's amazing attack power, Kyoya countered it with his own attack power, even though he's a defensive type. Jinga taking the battle to the sky because he is the winged horse. Kyoya created a tornado mid-air and used it to climb higher than Pegasus. I mean, he had Jinga pinned for most of the fight, but in the end they did tie. What separates it for me though is just Kyoya countering every single move from Jinga. He's not above him by a lot. It's a very thin margin, but I do have Kyoya above Jinga here. The next change is Nile jumping above Sophie for the 6th spot. Nile beat Masamune very convincingly, but he hasn't really shown that he could take on Dark Ryuga. That's all the changes for this arc, so now we can move on to the Excalibur arc, which is episodes 75 to 80. This is of course the arc where we focus on Team Excalibur. They swept Wang Huzhong, winning 2 battles in a row, and then they had their fight with Japan. But something else happens in this arc, and it answers a question that we've had since the end of Metal Fusion. What happened to Ryuga? Well, he has a new Beyblade now, and he's overcome the dark power. He also gives Tsubasa some advice against the dark power, which is kind of nice. Now, in this arc, we don't see his full power. We only see some of it, but even so, he puts on a crazy display. Ryuga reclaims his spot on the top of the list. I mean, he had meteors falling from the sky, and he legit tossed around Sophie and Wales, who've been in the top 10 for a while now. He also claimed that since he's overcome the dark power, he's gotten so much stronger than he was before, and he was already top 10. And when he had that brief match with Jinga, he was out here giving him advice, which is something that only a strong and experienced blader can do, so that's why he's number 1. Jinga's actually going to jump above Julian and Kyoya for the number 2 spot. He of course beat Julian in a very contested fight, and he made a new special move which was very, very powerful. Because he and Kyoya tied, I think that this new move and all the things Ryuga taught him about Pegasus would be enough to put Jinga back above Kyoya. Again, a very razor thin margin between the two, but I think this new move is just so powerful, and if it's already that close, I think it's going to be the difference maker to put Kyoya above. Then we have Tsubasa, who finally overcame the dark power with a new special move. With this new move, he beat Sophie and Wales by himself, which is very impressive. It's a shame he couldn't get to top 5, but there's just so many strong bladers now. The only other change here is Klaus at the number 8 spot. It's crazy how much power levels have already increased. I mean, we have characters as strong as Sophie and Wales at the bottom of the list, and the truth is they're probably going to get kicked off as we still have so many other powerful bladers who are about to crack the list. So let's get into the Brazil arc, which is episodes 81 through 84. This segment's going to be a short one because the Garcia arc was pretty short and it didn't really change things. Our only addition to the top 10 was Argo, who was pretty strong. He had this new, really strong version of Tsubasa completely pinned, but I don't see him going any higher than Nile. Besides that though, no other change changes. This was a great arc for Tsubasa, and it was overall entertaining and unique with the Brazilian knockout match. But now we can move on to the USA arc. This one has a ton of new additions, so I'm going to divide it into two pieces. The first piece is going to be episodes 85 through 90. This section covers Japan's arrival to America all the way up to Damien versus Julian. So here's the top 10 for the first section of the Starbreaker arc. We have Damien at the 1, and hear me out. We saw this guy just show up and completely destroy two of our main characters, and then we saw him solo a stronger version of Team Excalibur all by himself very easily. Everyone was blown away by Damien's power here, and because this video only focuses on what we knew at the time, Damien looks undefeatable. Then we're gonna have Jack and Zio at the 6 and 7 respectively. Jack completely embarrassed Klaus, and Zio was putting in work against Jinga and Masamune in a 2v1. Damien really showed us a level of power that we didn't even think was possible, and Team Starbreaker are looking pretty overpowered. We also see a special move out of Ryuga, and it's pretty interesting to see him get involved with all of this. Now we're going to move on to the second half of the Starbreaker arc, which is episodes 91 through 95. This arc gives us the much anticipated final matchup between Masamune and Zio, Jinga and Damien, and we even have Ryuga and Jack settling their beef here too. Ryuga takes the #1 spot back, and Damien's going to fall to 3rd. The Dragon Emperor's Supreme Flight mixed with El Drago's ability to straight up just rob your power makes Ryuga an easy first choice. I mean, he made a fool out of Jack, who's pretty strong. Speaking of Jack, with this loss, he's kind of brought back down to earth, and we realized that he wasn't as strong as we once thought. Same thing kind of happens for Zio. He won, and he had a crazy special move, but again, we realized that he wasn't as strong as we once thought. I mean, there's a serious discussion to be had on whether or not he loses had Masamune kept his special move going, and it's overall just not a great look that it took all of his energy to beat someone who's not even in the top 10. This arc was an amazing conclusion to the World Championships, and once again, we see power levels increase dramatically. So now, last but definitely not least, we have the final arc of Metal Masters, the Hades City arc, or the Spiral Force arc. It's episodes 96 to 102, and it gave us so many new matchups, and a lot of characters were really able to shine here like they haven't been able to before. Let's just get right into the top 10. I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I have Faust in first place. I know a lot of people have Ryuga over him, and I completely understand, but in this arc alone, Faust had the most power that we'd ever seen in the series. The sheer amount of energy this guy was able to produce was just unreal. Both of his matches were 2v1s. He lost the first one because Ryuga helped, so that was kind of a 3v1. And then I guess he lost to Masamune and Zio, but they really just brought Faust back after showing him memories and stuff. It wasn't like a legit win, in my opinion. But yeah, his special move, Spiral Dimension, is inescapable at this point of the series. I mean, no one has ever broken out of it without outside help. Maybe I'm wrong and Ryuga deserves first place, but Faust is no lower than second. Then with Kyoya's win over a stronger version of Damien, I now have him tied with Jinga. Deshain jumps above Julian because he beat him in a match. Tsubasa and Nile both jump above Jack. For Tsubasa, it's because he beat him, and for Nile, it's because he intercepted and overpowered Julian's full power special move, and then Zio's gonna keep his spot at number 10. So that was the final arc of Metal Masters. For a quick recap, here's the first one, the selection arc, compared to now. A very huge leap in power levels for sure, but if you want to see an even bigger leap, let's take a look at the rankings for the first arc of Metal Fusion. So the first arc of the series. We have Osamu, Takashi, and Akira actually in the top 10. And then compared to this top 10, it's just night and day. But that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.